One of the wonderful things about being involved with the founding of the Bush School of Business has been the incredible diverse group of individuals that the school's vision and mission has brought together. This afternoon's panel is a testimony to that. Two of them are Bush School collaborators who've been with us from the very beginning and even prior to the school being formed, in John Abate and Don Carpenter. And one of our more recent friends and collaborators, Steve Grossman. And the way we're going to work this panel is I'm going to give a brief introduction of each panelist right before they speak, and I'll come back up and introduce each. I'll give them each 10 minutes. I'll set a timer, so your signal will be when I come back up to the stage that we're getting close to the end of your segment, and then try to leave some time for some interaction between the panelists at the end. And we'll go in alphabetical order. So let me begin with John. As I mentioned, John has been associated with the school from its very beginning. I think he was one of our first, if not the first, CEO lecturer, and came back by popular demand. I think one of the only ones who've spoken twice in our CEO lecture series to our students. You can see John in our first episode of A Force for Good, the TV show we co-produce with EWTN. John is the owner of a chain of McDonald's restaurants throughout Central California. Second-generation franchisee, John took over the chain with his brother from their father, who was one of the earliest McDonald's franchisees. He has a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of San Diego and an MBA from Notre Dame, and another master's degree in theology from the Augustine Institute. He speaks around the country to business leaders and faith groups on the integration of faith, family, and business. He recently authored Invest Yourself, Daring to be Catholic in Today's Business World, a strategic advisor to the Dynamic Catholic Institute, and serves on several boards of Catholic and secular nonprofits. I would say that John is one of the leading voices in the new evangelization, especially to the world of business. He lives with his wife, Karen, in Central California, and their 3 children. I'll give you John.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's great to be here. What a wonderful conference. And I can never get enough of this type of thing because it's only through this type of community that each and every one of us can ever reach that universal call to holiness that is our proper calling. When we're working together and sharing ideas, it lifts us all up and allows us to strive to be that human being we're called to be. So thank you for being here. I'm a McDonald's owner-operator, and I love what I do. I serve a lot of burgers and fries and shakes and drinks and all that kind of good stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm not curing cancer. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a member of the armed forces helping out solving the injustice of the world. I'm serving burgers and fries and shakes. And I say that not to demean the job that I'm doing, but my point is simply this, is that there's some jobs where the work itself is truly powerful and meaningful and intrinsic for the common good. The job itself is very, very powerful for lifting up our society. But see, for most of us, we have to bring the intrinsic meaning to the job. See, it's our opportunity and our job to bring our time and our talent and our gifts to the job, to make that job intrinsically meaningful. And I think that's an incredibly important distinction to understand, is that that's how God works in our lives, and that is truly the power of vocation. And so in the McDonald's world, I want to bring the intrinsic meaning to the job, because if I don't do that, then it's merely a transactional business that's providing a service that some people in America think that we don't need. In fact, I was looking on the internet today and I had to laugh. The latest study showed that in any given day, 1/3 of the population will visit a quick service restaurant. So that's good for me, but I'm not sure the rest of society likes that. Now, that's a debatable issue. But my point is that this is my opportunity to serve the world through my 2,000 employees. And if I miss that opportunity, then I'm certainly not living my faith in business. And so we like to talk about McDonald's as a bridge. McDonald's is a bridge of hope for all the folks that work for us. And so it's our opportunity to teach our young folks what it means to live your life, your work as a vocation. And so often our young folks don't really have an understanding of what that means. They come to the workforce 16 or 17 or 18 or 20 years old, and they haven't learned many of the foundational principles that we all take for granted. Understanding of hospitality, punctuality, respect. They don't understand these things, and so it's an opportunity for me and for our organization to help them along the way. And in order to do that, we try to focus on 4 key areas. Number 1 is to give them an understanding of purpose and self-worth. Make sure they understand that they're valuable, and so often they come from Hispanic, poor immigrant households where their folks are working in the fields and they haven't had the opportunities to understand those type of things. They come from many very dysfunctional families. And so it's our opportunity to make sure they understand that they have purpose and self-worth and that the job can add value and give them value, more importantly. Number 2, help them understand the impact of family and what that means to be a healthy and happy individual in this world. And so we try to make sure they understand family and make sure that we harness this understanding of flexibility in the workplace to allow them to be able to live their life. And if they're a Hispanic mom that's home with 2 kids, that she can work in and around her kids' schedule and go to the soccer games and do the things she needs to do to be that mom for her children. So family first. Number 3 would be really about encouragement and self-compassion. So often our young people come to us and social media beats these kids up, beats them up, and so often they don't feel good about who they are and the value they add. They're never wealthy enough. They don't go on the nicest vacations. Everybody else has something nicer or better than them because that's all they see on social media. We encourage them to take risk and to make mistakes, but also we hold them accountable to punctuality. We hold them accountable to appearance standards, things that we take for granted, but they need to understand and learn to be successful in the workplace. And number 4, we want them to understand the power of reciprocity and the power of hospitality and how important it is in every aspect of our lives. We innately want to reciprocate. We innately want to give and receive. And if we can understand that and use that power of reciprocity for good in our country, it would be amazing what we could accomplish. And in the hospitality industry, reciprocity is incredibly important. And anybody in the hospitality industry understands how powerful just a simple smile or a thank you or, hey, how are you doing today? What can I do for you today? Can impact some lives. And I have story after story of that power of reciprocity. And so these are just some of the things we try to talk about with our young folks to give them that bridge of hope that leads them to the rest of their life. Is that my 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I think we've got a couple of minutes to try to balance.
Thank you, John. Our second panelist is Don Carpenter. Don has been affiliated with the School of Business since well before its founding. She had served on the advisory board for what was then the Department of Business, which preceded the school, a longtime adjunct professor for several of our programs. After spending 25 years in the banking industry, ranging from senior positions at some of the largest banks to small community-based banking, Dawn turned her energies towards studying and promoting Christian theology, what Christian theology has to say about the nature of work and the responsibility of wealth. You can see and read Dawn's columns on work and faith. They're widely available across online platforms and a lot of the Catholic media. You can also follow her at her Twitter handler, Why We Work, and her podcast, More Than Money. She has a doctorate in liberal studies from Georgetown University, a master's in theology from Christendom College, and a master's in public sector financial management from University of Maryland, all of these after her undergraduate degree and master's at American University in political science. Probably one of the more relevant things to today's topic is Dawn is a practitioner fellow, no matter how many times I practice this, at the Kalmanovitz Center, the Kalmanovitz Initiative at Georgetown University. One of the programs out there doing some really great work on helping to focus unions back on their core founding of helping the working poor. So I give you Don.
Well, thank you for having me here today. And I look out in the audience and I see a lot of friendly faces, so it's nice to be back among friends. So thank you for having me. What I've come to talk to you about today with my colleagues sitting here is a topic often that we don't pause to think about. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to think about, but I think it's important for us to think about because as Catholics, it's core to who we are and what our mandate is as people in the world. So we're talking on our panel today about the periphery. Well, what does the periphery mean? The periphery means those on the margins. And what does being on the margin mean? Or what does it mean to be marginalized? It's really the process of that sometimes we don't think about, but it's the process of pushing people to the edges of society and not allowing them to have an active voice in our identity or even a place in our society. Some people call this social exclusion. I'll sit here and I'll tell you today, Sheila from Relevant Radio said, talk about your own stories. I come from a marginalized place. I had a mother who was incarcerated. I had a father who was an addict. I, at one point in my life, had been homeless. I'm the first in my family to go to college, let alone stay there, and then on to Wall Street. If you stop and think, there are probably people in your own lives who are on the periphery. So when we think about this, we think about marginalization in the world of work, but also marginalization of those who don't work. So let's start at the place you may be most comfortable, which is marginalization in work. We do this by a variety of means. We do it through the use of derogatory language. We use this when we assume that people's accomplishments aren't based upon merit. We do this by expecting individuals to act a certain way based upon their identity. We deny people opportunities because of their identity. Think of racism, sexism, ableism, and all kinds of other isms, and not providing equal access to certain resources based upon an identity. That's how we are guilty of this. But how do we think about these marginalized groups? Sometimes it's just by categories. I mentioned the homeless, the poor being those who are unemployed or underemployed. Think about felons. One of the most downloaded episodes of our podcast was an episode on work after incarceration. That is a very difficult, challenging place to be. And statistics say about 95% of the persons in jail will be out of jail. Sometimes they go back, but they go out. And one of the most effective tools to prevent recidivism is a job. Think about the disabled, physically disabled, mentally disabled. Think about those with mental illness, those with substance abuse problems, racial and cultural minorities, the LGBT community, immigrants, veterans, and I hate to say it, and it's going to affect all of us at one point or another, senior citizens. They all, at one time or another, will feel on the periphery. And so I offer this to you by way of thinking about what the real problem is in terms of being marginalized. And it was referenced in my educational background. I'm actually still writing my dissertation at Georgetown on the concept of contributory justice. And that's what I offer to you today as the fundamental injustice in the concept of being in a marginalized state or being on the periphery. And that is to say that theologically, we're all called to be co-workers with God, to grow and to develop our unique capacities to contribute to the work of the world, where work is understood as activity and action, contribution, not just in the marketplace, but in all facets of life. Philosophers, particularly those who conceive justice in its distributive sense, and which means, is there justice in what I get, are now being challenged by those who think of justice in yet another complexion, which is there the ability to do to provide opportunities to do and to contribute. There is an injustice or a fundamental disorder when a person is prohibited from contributing. We all can't contribute the same, but we all are unique, have a unique purpose in the world, and that purpose is to contribute to the best of our own capacities. And there's injustice when we're not afforded the opportunity to do that. And how does that happen? Well, that happens when we don't have access to safe communities. We don't have access to a base level of health care. We don't have access to stable families. All those things that help a human being develop into the person that he or she is supposed to be. And so we feel this marginalization in the world of work when we don't treat hardworking employees in a way that say it a different way. When the treatment of hardworking employees those employees aren't encouraged to advance. We see them as just doing their job, but we don't encourage them to do more. We aren't mentoring or counseling our employees to be in a better position within the organization. We take them for granted because they're dependable or because they're productive. We don't often think about that when we think about the periphery or who's on the margins. And perhaps there's also the situation where we overlook others while we're giving preferential treatment to someone else. So in all those ways, people in the world of work can be marginalized. What does it feel like to be marginalized? Perhaps you felt this way from time to time in your own career. You feel disengaged, in fact, because you're not contributing. In fact, a recent Gallup poll reported that about 70% of employees in their survey on this subject said that they didn't feel engaged in work, which would suggest that 3 of 10 do. So I think we can do better. If an employee feels disengaged in work, he or she feels like a commodity, and particularly not a very valued commodity. Not only does that employee suffer, but the employees throughout the company suffer, and the company suffers itself. If employees don't feel like they're being taken seriously by an organization, critical talents are squandered, and productivity suffers, leading to missed deadlines, wasted resources, and reduced profits. That's for the people that we do employ. How do we keep these people engaged? Well, we provide them with professional development at all levels, not just those at the earlier levels or earlier stages in their careers, but all throughout their career so they can continue to grow and to develop. We also encourage team feedback by evaluating employees, because remember, managers aren't always privy to employees' performance in the way that their coworkers are. We also give team leaders the flexibility to make changes, because sometimes good employees are in a good company, but they might not be in the right place in that company. And then we don't limit our communication to text and emails. There's something to be said about not being able to replace the importance of human connection. And then performance appraisals by managers should include specific behaviors that those managers can exhibit that minimize the marginalization of their employees. And I would be remiss if I didn't remind you all from time to time to tell your employees thank you. This is particularly important in difficult economic times where financial remuneration for showing value or particular contribution to work may otherwise be warranted. So as human beings, we want to make a meaningful contribution, and we know that our efforts are genuinely appreciated. It's not just the right decision, it's the best decision to ensure that your employees never feel marginalized. Well, what does marginalization look like on the margins, meaning for those who don't have work or don't have adequate work? Well, certainly one of the big problems are barriers to work, inadequate training and education, lack of childcare, having been previously incarcerated, your immigrant status, inadequate transportation, discrimination, and maybe just a lack of opportunity. All of these things are real, particularly for those groups that I talked about at the beginning. Well, what can be done? I think one of the most important things that we can do, and perhaps the easiest, is to just be aware. Be aware of what's going on in your own companies, be aware of what's going on in your local communities, but think about its implications globally. And so what can we do about it? Well, I argue that we should bolster institutions that promote individual capacity building, such as I said earlier, such as healthcare, safe and vibrant communities, educational opportunities, and a very important point that Max had made earlier, stable families. And so I suggest that we also should promote and support social programs that uplift work and promote opportunities. I look as an example to California, the Work Opportunities Tax Credit Program, the Noon Markets Tax Credit Program that helps promote safe and vibrant, economically diverse communities, opportunity zones. And I urge you, if you're not familiar, become familiar and invest in CDFI financial institutions who are in the business of working in marginalized and disinvested communities. And on a global level, the United Nations has offered to us goal number 8, promote sustained, inclusive, sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. I'm encouraged. I like to highlight great examples of this work on my podcast by featuring social enterprises. One of my favorites is Thread Harvest. It's a company out of Australia that actually allows its fashion customers, it's a site that sells clothing and accessories, to choose which type of enterprise they want to support. Do they want to support an enterprise that promotes a living wage, empowering women, eco-friendly, fair trade, employing the marginalized, or charity support? You as a consumer can make that choice. Grayson Bakery, you may be familiar if you like to eat ice cream, out of Yonkers, New York, employs the formerly incarcerated to make brownies for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. I featured LA Kitchen on our show, which has a program that trains formerly incarcerated men and women to work in the culinary arts. So there's all this dynamic activity happening in social enterprise, and impact sourcing is another trend that we're seeing, where companies will actually go and secure and outsource business activity to marginalized communities. So as I would conclude my remarks, I'd remind you that we're all called to work, as we've been talking about here, and contribute by the virtue of just being a person. Work is an action that is all the action that we do in the world, not just what we do in the workplace. And work confers dignity because it helps us build up ourselves, but also build up our community. And as Catholics, we have a unique call to uplift the poor and the marginalized. And by virtue of contributory justice, we seek justice by providing opportunities for all to contribute. Contribution is an obligation, but it's also a right. And I ask, as I do every day, St. Matthew, patron saint of bankers, pray for me, and St. Joseph, the worker, pray for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Our final panelist, as I mentioned, Steve Grossman. As I mentioned, he's one of our newest friends of the Bush School. Steve is the CEO of the Initiative for Competitive Inner City, also known as ICIC. The Bush School has partnered with ICIC as part of our Enterprise Solutions to Poverty, working with over 100 small to medium-sized companies right here in the community to help them improve their businesses. I'm sure Steve will mention a little bit maybe about this in his remarks, but I think Steve felt at home very quickly at the Bush School, first and foremost because he's a principled entrepreneur himself. For 35 years, he was the president of the Grossman Marketing Group, a fourth-generation family business. Beyond his business success, Steve has been a local and national civic leader, serving as the elected treasurer of the state of Massachusetts from 2011 to 2015, board chair of Brandeis University, former national chairman of the Democratic National Committee, former president of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Steve is a graduate of Princeton University and the Harvard Business School. I know that he's very comfortable among academics because his wife is Dr. Barbara Wallace Grossman, a professor at Tufts University. They are the proud parents of 3 sons and grandparents to 6. Steve.
Thank you very much. So before this panel began, we were all encouraged to tell stories. And I think storytelling is critical. So let me tell you a story. It was just a little over 2 years ago that I had the initial conversation with Bill Bowman, Dean of the Bush School of Business. Bill was a Bostonian for many years. He had agreed to come down to Catholic to become Dean of the Bush School, but he's also a serial entrepreneur. So he reached out to his dear friend, Nitin Noria, the Dean of the Harvard Business School, and said, Nitin, the Bush School of Business would like to use its resources to turn moral leadership into positive action. We have an obligation to enrich, to enlarge, to enliven the life of the community right here in DC. Whom should we reach out to, and how should we go about doing it? Noria reached out to Michael Porter, the legendary business professor at Harvard Business School, global guru of strategy and competitiveness, who reached out to me, and Bill and I had our initial conversation. And it was clear from the first moment exactly what Bill intended. Bill shared with me his belief that to take Catholic social teaching and to bring it into the school and to bring it into the community in a way that lifts up those small businesses in communities characterized by high levels of poverty, unemployment, high levels of diabetes, obesity, food deserts, low birth weight babies, lack of wellness outcome. Life expectancy in some of these neighborhoods, 15 to 17 years less than in some of the communities located only 4 or 5 miles from here, where the people who live in those neighborhoods have way more than the ones in the communities very close to Catholic. So what did we do? We got together because ICIC, the Initiative for Competitive Inner Cities, started by Dr. Porter 25 years ago, is all about the revitalization of inner cities. Porter has always believed that while government can play a role, and an important role, new market tax credits is a perfect example that Dawn mentioned, Porter believes that it is all about lifting up small businesses, privately owned, and the private sector providing the education, the coaching, and the capital necessary to grow those businesses and create good-paying jobs with good benefits that lift people up and give people the kind of standard of living that they need. So we began that journey together. I wasn't sure exactly what to say at the opening kickoff breakfast. We had 150 people in the room. The Cardinal was speaking. The president of the university was speaking. Bill was speaking. And here I was at Catholic University of America, Jewish leader from Boston, trying to figure out how do we bring this all together? And I realized that what brought us all together was our common belief contained in Scripture, and my favorite passage of Scripture is Isaiah 58:10. We all know that passage. If you offer your compassion to the hungry and relieve the oppressed, then shall your light shine in darkness, and your gloom shall be like noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will slake your thirst in parched places and give strength to your bones. And you will be known as the rebuilder of ancient walls, the restorer of dwelling places, the repairer of the breach. Repair of the breach. We live in a society in which we aspire to inclusive prosperity, but we fall short of that every minute of every day. And the question is, how do we create inclusive prosperity? How do we give people the tools and the skills to be able to compete, succeed, and win? And how do we teach principled entrepreneurship so that those business owners create good-paying jobs with good benefits? Because as we just published earlier this week, at a 20-year study of the most successful inner-city businesses in America, those that are growing the fastest, growing revenue, growing profitability, growing their employment base, are the ones that provide the best benefits. I ran a company for 35 years, Grossman Marketing. Used to be an envelope company, an envelope manufacturing company, started by my grandfather in 1910. Company became a union shop in 1952. Companies never had a strike, a lockout, or a single matter go to arbitration. People say, why on earth do you pay people in your industry 20 to 25% more than the competition, and provide paid family leave, and provide free home ownership loans, which are paid off if you've been with the company for 5 years in full, no reimbursement required? Why do you do that? How can you afford to do that? My answer, very simply, how can you afford not to do that? Because the great companies, whether they're in the food service business or whether they're in the marketing communications business, are the ones that have superb workforces, longevity, loyalty, deep commitment, a living wage, and better than that, great benefits, an opportunity to provide for a family. Our company, now called Grossman Marketing, 2 employees, one Mike Elwell, the other Eli Davis, came to the company the same day that I came to the company back in the 70s, still with the company 40 plus years later. What does that mean to a company when you can compensate and treat your workers with the respect and dignity that lifts them up and gives them the tools and skills to be able to build a family, to educate kids, to be able to have leisure time, to do all the things that Max talked about earlier with your leisure time? What does that mean? And what does the individual give back to the company in return? And how do you create a great company that differentiates itself from the competition and competes and wins in the marketplace because of the caliber and quality of the women and men who work, live, and hopefully retire with dignity from that company? So we brought this program to Catholic, to Washington. As Phil said, over 100 entrepreneurs participated in the program. It's a short program, it's 40 hours. We call it a 40-hour mini MBA on steroids. We teach strategy and marketing and team building and leadership effectiveness and entrepreneurial finance. We give those business owners coaching and mentoring. We teach them about capital, the different forms of capital that you need. Because if you ask the average small business owner in these poor neighborhoods, what are the things that they lack? They'll say, I've been trained, I've been coached, but I can't get capital. I run into a brick wall, I can't get the capital I need. Inner city business owners, distressed and underserved communities. So we teach them about the different forms of capital. Dawn mentioned CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions. Those are gap lenders, because in 2008, when the roof fell in on us, we had the worst recession in 100 years, the banks stopped lending to most small businesses, particularly in the inner cities. Very difficult. Who stepped in? These CDFIs, these gap lenders, and they don't charge a usurious rate of interest. It's a higher rate of interest that you can get in a bank, but they were lending money. Their criteria were different because they were looking to build the business up and to create an ecosystem of sustainable businesses with good paying jobs and good benefits that enrich and enlarge the life of the community. So we're proud of the relationship we have with Catholic, particularly proud of the fact that the students of Catholic got involved with the program. There's an entrepreneurship program here taught by Mike Hernandez, with which Brian Becker works. And 10 students from Catholic, seniors at Catholic, came to Atlanta and studied with us all day and met small business owners. And they're going to come to Boston on November 13th to participate in our annual capital matching conference so that they can meet business owners, so that their senior year is a capstone project. Instead of simply studying business and entrepreneurship, they can go into the community and work with small business owners to help them with their internet or their marketing or whatever those business owners need. That's principled leadership. So it starts with principled leadership here at Catholic at Bush. It extends into principled leadership that we try to teach these business owners. It extends into principled leadership that we're teaching this next generation of students who will graduate from Catholic and go on to great jobs to deliver back into the community, to deliver the same kind of moral leadership that our program was brought here in the first place to deliver. So I'm profoundly grateful for this opportunity to be here, to partner with Catholic. We're having an alumni event here in Washington on November 7th to bring all those women and men back together again, because networking is critical, more learning. Bill Bowman is going to moderate a panel discussion for an hour so that they can learn more. They'll network, they'll find new customers, they'll find new sources of capital, We'll invite bankers to come, and we want every one of those alumni to nominate one inner city small business owner for 2019 so that when we bring this program back to Catholic, back to the Bush School of Business next year, we will really create that sustainable small business ecosystem that will change the face of this community for years to come. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Steve, and all our panelists. And with the little bit of time I have left, let me throw out just one question that you guys could each maybe just give a quick answer to. If there was one thing that either a corporate leader in today's audience could do to one change, big or small, that they could make to help people on the periphery get engaged in the economy, or even maybe one public policy change you think needs to happen, what would that be to help the periphery? John?
Yeah, you know, I find it really interesting what Carly Fiorina said yesterday, and she really hit on this understanding of how the workforce sometimes views themselves. And so, you know, we started a Dream Manager program in our organization a decade or more ago, and to help people, to get them along in life, new home, you know, whatever it is, college, all kinds of different things. And one of the things we found was exactly what Carly was referring to, is that they didn't have the confidence and respect of themselves. And so one of the things that I've tried to do over the last decade or more is spend a lot more time encouraging them and helping them to see themselves differently. So when they look in the mirror, they see somebody with tremendous potential and opportunity versus what the media out there is saying is a McJob, a dead-end job, which obviously is so far from the truth. But any one of our organizations, there's probably a job out there that somebody construes as a dead-end job or a meaningless job. But we all need a place to start. And we all need somebody to encourage us along the way. You know, Barnabas was there for St. Paul. If it wasn't for Barnabas, we wouldn't have St. Paul. He never would have existed. And so the question I have for the audience is, are you Barnabas? And who's your St. Paul? Because I think that is how we start to change the world, is being that encourager and to get these folks to see a little bit differently of themselves than what the world is seeing of them currently. And I think that's where we take those folks from the disenfranchised to the franchised.
Don?
Well, I think the simplest thing I could offer is to challenge you to give someone a second chance. I think one of the most inspired stories I've heard on my travels through my podcast has been, again, the shows that we've stressed the transformative change that work can do in a person's life. We did an episode on food deserts, and I had a man from Philadelphia who owns a chain of ShopRite grocery stores, whose mission is to set up grocery stores in food deserts, which is, in the grocery business, some of the most challenging work that there is. But he makes it work, and it becomes transformative when he promotes the opportunities in those stores to people who had spent time in jail. And so I don't know if you're ready to go there, but during my remarks, I listed a whole cadre of people who live on the margins, and I'd say, think about how you might be able to give one of those people a chance.
Two quick answers. One, and you mentioned food deserts, and I want to pick up on that because wellness outcomes are so critical to the health and well-being of these inner cities, these poor communities that have tremendous entrepreneurship within the communities, but it needs to be channeled, but you still have to be a healthy person to be able to live a full, rich, and sustained life. If anybody wants to know more about us, we're ICIC.org, ICIC.org. When you go on the website, you'll find a bunch of videos that have been produced by Kaiser Permanente. One of our partners, in addition to Catholic University, is Kaiser Permanente. Why? Kaiser Permanente is the largest nonprofit healthcare delivery system in America, 12 million members, 200,000 employees. And one of their suppliers that does landscaping for them is called Good Soil Industries. And when we ran the program for the first time in Los Angeles, they recruited Good Soil Industries. Now, why do I mention that? Because Good Soil Industries hire people formerly incarcerated to work in the organization. And when you watch the video, you'll see a man, formerly incarcerated, who says, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, in my former life, he said, and I have a daughter, when I wanted to buy something or I wanted to get something for my daughter, and I wasn't on the inside, I would steal it. Now he said, I'm working, and he pulled out his wallet and he said, now, when I go out, I can buy that gift with money that I earned and give it to my daughter, and I feel such a sense of pride that I'm doing things that are going to hopefully be a role model for her. Good Soil Industries gives those men and women a second chance, an opportunity. They're on the periphery, they're on the margin. It's not an easy thing to do for all kinds of reasons, but when you save one person, it's to save the world. It's an old expression, we know that expression well. Imagine what it means to those individuals for an entrepreneur to be willing to take that chance and to be enriched in the process, enriched spiritually, enriched economically, and be enriched emotionally, and to contribute to the building of the kind of society that truly is what is in Deuteronomy 16:20, where it says, justice, justice thou shalt pursue.
One more round of applause for our panel.